If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item carries. Going on to now item 34.
Item 34, 080269, authorizing...
Move, Mr. President.
Moved by Legislator LaFountain, second by Legislator Barker. Discussion. Ms. Angie.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I just want to take a brief second here to thank the administration for debriefing us on the settlement prior to sending it to us for our consideration. Certainly having time to review something makes us feel more informed in our roles as legislators, and that's always appreciated. In the debriefing, we went over a few of the details. I do have a few follow-up questions I'd just like to take a couple moments to ask. It's my understanding from the debriefing as well as the settlement that the amount estimated to be paid to the school districts for 2008 is between $29 and $30 million. And I just want to confirm that based on our sales tax collections to date, we're still on track that that's a correct figure through the President.
Through the President, approximately $29 million is what we would anticipate at this point.
And through the President, that number is going to be finalized in March of 2009. Is that correct?
Through the President, that is correct.
Okay. Based on that $29 million figure and the fact that the first payment to be made January 2nd of 2010 has a fixed interest rate of 2.85%, what would be your calculation as to how much that interest payment would be?
Through the President, based on the first payment, again, as you noted in the document itself, we have a variable rate of interest after that. Approximately the first interest payment would be about $2.6 million.
Okay. And through the President, you mentioned, or as you mentioned, there are several payments over a 5-year period, and I understand the next payments to be variable based on prime plus 1%. My understanding that prime is currently at 2%. So if prime were to remain around 2%, or even if it were to fluctuate slightly, what would you estimate the future interest payments to be for the subsequent 4 years?
Through the President, and I apologize, I was looking at the wrong spreadsheet when I gave you the 2.6 number. The actual number is 2.85% at $29 million. The first year's interest payment would be $1.3 million. Subsequent to that, we would pay approximately $1.6 million more, so a total of $3.1 million in interest if prime was to stay where it is today.
Okay. And a couple other questions regarding the county's legal fees. My understanding is the county used some outside representation on this litigation. Do you have an estimate of how much the county spent for its litigation fees for the legal case?
Through the President, approximately $40,000.
$40,000. Okay. Thank you for that. And I'm going to just speak briefly. I'm going to vote tonight in favor of the settlement. Certainly, it's almost ironic, I think, or coincidental at least, that approximately a year ago today, the FAIR Plan came before us. I think it was at the end of September in 2007. As I'm sure everyone remembers, it came before us very hastily. Certainly this side of the aisle only had about an hour and a half to review it. We've spoken about that process at length. And as I'm sure we all recollect as well, the majority voted in favor of the FAIR Plan, and this majority voted against it. Because we do believe it's always wrong to take money out of our children's classrooms, and that could possibly hurt the education of this community. And we also argued at that point that it was possibly illegal to unilaterally change a sharing agreement. So tonight I stand here just to say I'm glad to see that this is resolved. It's been a long year, and certainly perhaps this would be a note of caution that in the future, if we want to consider making such a huge change in how we govern and how we work with our sharing partners, perhaps more contemplation and the revealing of information to those sharing partners ahead of time, as well as to this body ahead of time, would serve us well. Thank you.
Mr. Rankin.
Thank you, Mr. President. I too just rise to explain my vote. And along with Legislator Andrews, I remember a little bit more than a year ago, I, along with many of my colleagues, spoke out about the rash detrimental effect of taking $20 million away from our local school districts. I heard, as well as many of you did, from numerous constituents about the negative impact not having this revenue would have on local districts. Therefore, I'm pleased that the county has agreed to pay back the $29 million with interest, and I'll be voting in favor of this referral tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? Mr. Beebe.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just have one question in regards to the fund that this is going to come out of, the risk management fund. And what is the current amount that's available in that fund? Through the President, I believe it's about $1.5 million. We had that settlement last month, if you recall, that was pretty significant. And I checked on it then, and I think it was about $1.5 million. But I can get you that figure. All right, but that's an approximation. All right, thank you. So on the first year payment here, is that going to be coming out of that fund through the chair?
Through the President, that's correct. It will come out of that fund.
And what about the future years?
Future years will be budgeted for part of the operating budget.
And also coming out of that risk management fund?
That's correct, yes.
All right, thank you. I have no further questions.
Any further discussion? Mr. Haynes.
Mr. President, a clarification on the answer to the last question. I assume the $200,000 that we have to pay the school districts this year for their legal fees will be coming out of the risk management fund. But will the several $million payment in January of 2010 be coming out of the risk management fund?
Through the President, that is what we anticipate doing. It would be through a transfer from the general fund over to the risk retention fund to fund that payment back to the district.
Oh, so we would budget the money in the 2010 budget, and it would be transferred into the risk management fund and then paid out of that. But for the $200,000 of legal fees, there is a sufficient balance there now to pay those legal fees?
Through the President, there is a sufficient balance in the risk retention fund to do that.
Thank you. Mr. President, I rise to join, and I'm sure with every other member of this legislature, in urging my colleagues to approve this agreement. It brings on what are probably the best terms the county could have hoped to have gotten. It brings to a close an unfortunate segment of county history. I just find it unfortunate that we're facing a situation in which, for the mistake that we made a year ago, we're going to be paying well in excess of $3 million of interest, as well as $200,000 of school district legal fees and $40,000 of county legal fees, because of the mistake that this legislature made a year ago. My own estimate is that the interest, the $3.1 million estimate that the Director of Finance has given assumes that the federal funds rate would remain at the current historically low 2%. With modest increase in that federal funds rate, which will accompany what I hope will be an economic recovery during the next 7 years. That interest rate will rise, so that I frankly am assuming that this is going to cost somewhere at least in the neighborhood of $3.5 million. You add in the legal fees, and we're quickly pushing $4 million. So I just think it's unfortunate that the taxpayers of this county are going to pay a fee, if you will, of $4 million, fortunately spread out over several years,